Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 14 of BizPod.Ninja. Actually, I've said this again. Not BizPod, CorpDev. I've done a rebrand. CorpDev right here. Oops, this side. We've got Paul Murphy here today from London. How are you, Paul?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Doing well as one can is doing as well as one can be basically right now during COVID. I think we're all been kind of locked up. Paul, how have you been hanging out? How have you been dealing with COVID? We'll get into the show and questions, and there's a lot of interesting things and experiences that you bring to the table that we'll explore. But before we get there, how are you? How are the family? How are you holding up during these times?
Yeah, we're fine. I mean, London has been bad in terms of cases, but it's been a pretty easy place to be locked down. There's a lot of parks and everything else. So I've been in this little share this studio with my wife during the week. But I actually started going back to the office. I was in a taxi for the first time in 6 months yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you say taxi, black cab or Uber or
Black cab. Yeah, they've got the nice sort of plexiglass screen, so it feels safe.
Oh yeah, I remember those days in London. I used to love the black cabs. They are the best in the world. So the first time in 6 months. So you're finally getting reintegrated with society and world.
Slowly, yeah.
And does the city also feel does it feel like it's coming alive? Because I'm here in Los Angeles. People are still really locked down in California. What's the feeling like in London in general, besides yourself? Like,
it's definitely I think in the more residential areas it feels like normal. Restaurants are full, pubs are packed, probably too packed to be honest. Parks are full, but when you go into Soho or sort of the financial district in London, it's a ghost town. There's construction works everywhere, and loads of shops are closed. Very few people are out there. Got it.
Yeah, it's strange times. Hope to see you and family soon when all this is over. I'm going to do a quick bio for you, Paul. Paul Murphy is general partner at Northzone, based in London, and focuses mainly on companies in the consumer, entertainment, and enterprise application spaces. Paul was founder and CEO of Dots, that recently sold to Take-Two Interactive Software for nearly $200 million. His portfolio includes Hopin, 30Madison, Klang, and Bunch. Prior to Northzone, Paul founded and was CEO of mobile games company Dots and part of the founding team of Giphy. Before this, he held several roles at Microsoft in the US, UK, and in India. I remember when you had that stint or that year, a couple years in India. That was an interesting time. I'd love to ask you some questions about that as well. Paul holds a BS in computer engineering from Virginia Tech and an MBA from IE Business School in Spain, where he's an adjunct professor. So, Mr. Murphy, time for the main interview questions. You have a super interesting background from large corporates to founding and selling 3 companies, which is super impressive. And now you're a VC. Why did you decide to be a full-time VC, and why Northzone? And I also know you prior to going to Northzone full-time, you already had investing experience. You were doing angel investments. So why the transition now to being a full-time VC, and why Northzone?
Yeah. Well, let's see. First off, I want to say a lot of people probably don't know who Northzone is because it's outside of the Nordics and Europe. It's not quite the household brand in the States. But it's a group that's super interesting. They've been around for 25 years. They backed Spotify at Series A, iZettle at Series B, Avito, which is the largest classifieds business in the world, at Series A. So it really had some of the most kind of iconic European exits. But sort of I'll come back to why I joined that group in particular. But actually going quite a bit back when I was at Microsoft, I thought I wanted to be a VC. I thought it would be so much fun to sort of invest other people's money in companies I didn't have to run. And I went out and I thought this would be great.
What's fun about that?
What's fun about investing?
No, I'm saying what you're saying. I think it would be really fun about that. What was like the main kind of compelling point for you?
I mean, I was a sort of a much sort of younger and more naive version of myself, but I think I was like, I can go in all of these different industries. I can totally hedge myself, and one of them has to pop, and then something good happens. I didn't understand venture. I think that was kind of my takeaway. I spent a bunch of time interviewing at different funds, and they basically had sort of written me off as a corporate guy because I'd been at Microsoft for too long. So I was like, all right, that's not going to work. Went back to finish my MBA, went back to Microsoft, and then I joined a company, one of the three that you mentioned, Aviary, as COO, and I basically helped them pivot the business, and they eventually sold the company to Adobe. It was a great outcome for the investors and the founders, but I realized that if I wanted to kind of have a real impact, I should start something. So then I kind of went and did the founder thing, which you mentioned, and it wasn't until I was leaving and transitioning out of Dots, coming back to London with my family, that I got approached. It was the other way around. And all of a sudden they were like, hey, you've done some founder things. That's cool. You've also done some investing. Would you like to invest full time? And then I entertained that and ultimately decided to do it. So I was debating between do I do investing or do I start something else? And it's pretty exhausting starting running companies. So I just felt like it was time to do something different.
You paid your dues, and you bring all that operational excellence into your investing perspective, right? So tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing at Northzone, just in general. What are some of the companies that you're most interested in? What's your focus? I think we mentioned a few on there in the bio, but what is it that you're most interested in these days at Northzone?
Yeah, so we're our latest fund, we launched it a year ago. It's a $500 million early stage fund. So we do seed and Series A. Occasionally we'll do stuff a little bit later. But it's an early stage fund. So, which was really attractive for me because I love product and I love hanging out with founders. And so for me, the common thread is basically founders and product. I've invested in 2 gaming companies, a mobility company, a health company, 2 B2B SaaS companies. Some of them we haven't announced yet. And so there's not a whole lot of kind of connection across them from like a sector perspective. But in all of those cases, I fell in love with the products they were building. I thought the founders were amazing people, and I wanted to like spend the next 5-10 years with them. So anyway, I'm pretty focused on early stage stuff. There's some of my partners that are a little bit kind of more excited about kind of late Series A, Series B, but I tend not to go that way.
So really for you, it's like you got to like the business. You're totally opportunistic. You got to be early enough, and it's really a focus on team. Is that right? Yeah.
I mean, I think it's funny. I mean, there's a lot of interesting sort of comedy value, I think, in the venture world, and I try not to take it too seriously. But I do think some people kind of overbrand themselves as being an expert on X, Y, or Z, and I'm the marketplaces person or a mobility person. But the reality is, I think most people, smart people, can pick up these industries fairly quickly. And right. I don't think being an expert makes you necessarily the best person to be part of the company. In fact, because I know so much about gaming, I try pretty hard not to do gaming investments because I tend to be a bit too cynical. I know all the things that could go wrong. And I feel like other people maybe are a bit better at seeing kind of the upside than I would be.
Oh, that's really interesting. I've heard that feedback before. Yeah. Once you've been so far into the weeds of a certain sector or business, you become, the threshold is much higher, and the filter is that much more. So interesting to hear that again. Eric Engineer we have from the community. He's saying he's sharing the love right now. He asked Eric Engineer, he wants to ask you how one effectively negotiates the sale of a G35. That is not a relevant question, Eric. We'll leave that for the end. But if you do have a better, meaningful VC one, we'll take it. No, Eric Engineer, good to see you here. Paul, what I'm really interested in, mostly to talk about as well, is congrats on the Dots acquisition. Nearly $200 million deal, M&A deal. I think it's, as of today, I still think it's the latest, biggest M&A transaction in gaming globally, right? And so tell me about the Dots transaction to take Take-Two Interactive. I'd love to learn about kind of what you did throughout that process from a corp dev perspective, especially. And for those of you who do not know Take-Two Interactive, they're one of the biggest gaming companies in the world, Grand Theft Auto being one of their flagship titles. So that gives you a perspective on how big and scale this company is. And to do an acquisition, to have, to run an M&A process and get acquired by Take-Two Interactive is a super high bar. So Paul, tell me about that process. And also, how did how did you go through that process while having left as a founder and being a full-time VC? Because it is an interesting one that founders don't usually have. Usually founders are in it through the end of a transaction, but it's interesting you were now in a new position while you still did that deal.
Yeah. Well, so I think the story actually starts 2 years ago. So we were gaming's hard because it just requires so much patience. You build a product, you iterate on it, and then eventually a few things kind of, as you continue to improve it, eventually things sort of take off. And for Dots, that happened a few times. So there was actually a few situations where all of a sudden our LTV shot through the roof. We juiced up marketing and our revenue went way up. But then, something can happen with the ad exchange on Facebook or whatever, and your costs go too high, and then you have to sort of climb back down. So that sort of oscillation is like super uncomfortable. But in one of those moments when we were growing nicely, we had another large public gaming company make us an offer. We weren't enamored with the deal, but it felt fair at the time. And we went through a process. We were in week 3 of a 4-week exclusivity period, and they pulled out. So
did you say 4-week exclusivity period?
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably should have hired you to help us with that deal. But so it was, we sort of thought it was done. And to be totally honest with you, like you feel like you get punched in the gut so many times when you're running a company that you started, and it was my last month being full-time there. So it was like the ultimate punch to the gut, because not only did that not happen for me, but more importantly, I felt like I had failed the team because I was supposed to transition them to, new leadership. And we thought we had that with this deal. But anyway, so we got super lucky because we found this guy, Nir, who is an incredible executive. He was one of the most senior executives at King.com, which is like probably one of the best mobile gaming studios out there. And we were able to move him from London to New York and get him excited about running the company. And he did that with my co-founder, Patrick. And those guys were like, it was just this incredible marriage between the two of them. And so I transitioned from CEO to a board member, did my best to sort of help them along the way, and, some people issues or partnerships. But they just sort of kept at it, and they kept growing revenue. And so the business has been profitable for a long time and growing. And then eventually, you can see a lot of the data on App Annie and other platforms. So all the sort of big people knew where we were, and we got approached by a few different firms, and the team got most excited about Take-Two, and that's where they went.
So you got approached. You guys didn't have a process. It was opportunistic.
Yeah. I mean, I would say one of my learnings was that you're kind of always in a process. I think as the CEO, I think some founders take different approach to this. My approach, and the approach that Dots and Giphy took, was to just keep ongoing dialogue with the companies that you think could end up acquiring you, so that if a deal ever makes sense, you're not sort of starting from ground zero, building a relationship. You already know them. So I had actually met the Take-Two team multiple years back, and we loved what they had done. We got to visit their studio. So for me, it felt like an amazing fit, but that was obviously up to the team to decide.
Sure. Tell me a little bit more about that. When you said you started a relationship with Take-Two, you're a separate gaming studio. When you said you built a relationship, what was that like? Like, oh, we're thinking about, was it through the lens of possibly doing a partnership? Was it through, the context of co-creating another game or title? Like, how do you build that relationship when you're not talking about, let's say, a direct commercial deal or transaction? What is it? What's the advice you'd give there?
I think if you're doing something that's interesting, then most of the big studio in gaming, at least, most of the big studios want to know you. They want to get to know you because they know that at any moment your business could pop, and if they can move quick, it's the best thing, best outcome for them. So what I maintain, I would go to the gaming events. I would travel, to China. Tencent was one of our investors, so that investment happened through basically just networking at different gaming conferences. So Take-Two was one of many companies that we just kept in close contact with, and so they kind of always knew roughly what we were up to, and they bought Social Point, a really awesome game studio in Spain a few years before. So we knew they were kind of interested in mobile.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Awesome. That's like super proud of you. What a great transaction. I'd like to learn a little bit. What served you best in your previous experiences in dealing with that transaction? Because obviously the deal team from your side was probably yourself and a few other folks. What did you do previously to help you hone into to see this through the finish line successfully?
So, I mean, the deal team on the company side was definitely led by the CEO.
Of course.
The guy is he's a machine, super smart, very savvy. But one of the things I'm most proud of with Dots is the board that I assembled. So we had a board that included one of the presidents of Tencent, someone that used to be on the board of Activision Blizzard, and then was the managing director of KKR's media practice. We had Per Jorgen, who's one of my partners at Northzone, who was on the board of Spotify until they went public. John Borthwick at Betaworks. So we had this
Were they on the cap table of the company, or how did you get these folks on the board?
Yeah, so they're most of them were. The one I mentioned that had the background at Activision and KKR invested individually, and then we asked him to join as an independent. But so we kind of had built, and it's probably me getting ahead of myself, we sort of built this company to go public. It could go public with that board. And when it came time to explore a transaction, we had we just had all the experience around the table to get us through that. Yeah.
Yeah. I've worked with a lot of different companies in corporate development, M&A, and boards are, when you get to that process, if you have multiple folks on the cap table, like the board is everything. And it's great to work with good boards that work together well. But then when you have too many personalities or too many differences of opinion, I've seen boards take down companies and, essentially, destroy companies that could have had a success. And so I guess, reiterating kind of what you said, one of the best, in retrospect, looking back, having a solid board, a group of investors who were top of their game, no pun intended, in their respective fields and mobile gaming, but all those, but also unified in the vision of either taking this company, working together well, or selling to an attractive acquirer. So when you went through that M&A process, it sounded like pretty much the board members and the leadership team, everyone was, dancing to the same beat. Is that right? And that is ultimately kind of what helped you smoothly make that transaction?
Yeah, there's always some tension, I think, because the business was doing well, it was growing, and it was profitable. So I think the sort of management team, which I was no longer part of, was really bullish. They were like, okay, it seems like a good deal, but we also think we could keep growing this. And so I think for them, it was more around spending time with Take-Two and saying, can we do something really cool with them? And if they got that conviction over time, as investors and as a sort of founder that was on the cap table but not running the company, I felt like it was a great fit. So that to me was the most important thing. I would have been pretty bummed if the company ended up getting sold to a business and they weren't aligned on values or creative. The creative output was super different.
Like a PE company, like a PE shop that just wants NPV or ARR, and it's just like, hey, we're going to milk this thing.
Exactly.
And whenever the milk is dried, we're done.
You kill it and move on. Yeah.
No, I can see that. Love that story and that process. COVID has changed the landscape just in general. I imagine Hopin is doing really well during this time. What's your thoughts on COVID and the ecosystem across, just in general? Remote tools and interactive and online stuff seem to be doing really well. Other areas, not so much. What's your general perspective there, and anything relevant to your portfolios that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Hopin. Hopin is a company that we decided to invest back in November of last year. And it's because we felt like all the trends.
What a great time to invest in that company.
Yeah, well, I mean, the founder, Johnny, is absolutely incredible, and he just had complete confidence, and still does, that the world was going to change, and not a pandemic, but people and how they participate in events. And he came in on, I remember it was a Friday morning. He came in, he pitched his vision. I was super skeptical because when we were at Microsoft together, I did a lot of events. I was like, I just don't, I'm not sure I see this. And he was so compelling. We took him out for dinner on Saturday the next day, and we gave him a term sheet. And it was just, we wanted. You had dinner with him, and then the next day you gave him a term sheet. We did it all in one process. It was a 24-hour turnaround, and we ultimately ended up doing the round with Excel, which has been incredible to work with. But
who were you working with at Excel on that one? Just curious.
Sonali.
Okay.
Over here in London. So. We invested then, and the reality is we were all so convinced that this was the direction things were going to go. And so when COVID happened, it was kind of just an acceleration of what was already going to take place. It's just that, the Johnny and the team built in 6 months what most people would build in 6 years. I mean, on every dimension, from revenue perspective, employee perspective, the kinds of customers they're getting. It's making all of our minds melt, watching this happen kind of in front of us. We weren't surprised that they were able to do a really big growth round a few months later with IVP. But yeah, they've been sort of taken off. But it's not just that. I mean, you mentioned mobility. I know you're an investor in some mobility companies as well. Yep. I think a competitive company even.
Dot. So I know you're an investor in Tier in Europe.
Yeah.
And I'm an investor in Dot, but also Lime is also in Europe too. So two of Tier's competitors and a few other micro mobility scooter companies elsewhere in the world. But yeah,
it's impressive. Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's probably nice to be an investor in the number 2 and 3 player in Europe. But with Tier being number 1, it is interesting. All 3 of them are doing amazing, obviously. I think Dot won part of the Paris tender as well, didn't they?
I'm sorry?
I think Dot won the Paris tender along with Tier and Lime. So those are the 3. But their business is obviously, as you know, is totally changed also. Like they went through a few weeks where we're like, all right, I guess we're going to sort of have to pull all these things off the street to then turn around and be like, actually, we have to find a way to help doctors and police people get around the city safely. So they became an essential service, which, they went from being on the sort of shit list from local cities and municipalities to being almost like a lifeline. So I think it was a really cool. And then in
London, I think London recently opened up for the first time for this sort of mode of transportation, right? Because I know for years they were like shared bikes, mobility, and scooters were not permitted in London, and that's changed, right? And it's probably changed because of this.
Yeah. So the UK has now opened up, and they're doing trials all over the place. London now one of the things, if you drive through London, you'll see they're putting tons of bike lanes in. So they're kind of using the opportunity with COVID and fewer cars in the street to turn them into more like commuter-friendly streets. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to transform the city for sure.
It is definitely going to transform the cities. And I think for me, the approach on essential services and distance mobility is cities are finally waking up to that. And I think shared mobility, micromobility with bikes and scooters, like I couldn't agree with you more. They are at a pivotal moment. Unfortunately, those companies that did not have a strong balance sheet, many of them have withered away, and some have gotten acquired. Those who have strong balance sheets, good positions, I think when we emerge from this COVID experience, I think it'll be in a much better position, and I think probably find that growth kind of pre-COVID or pre-crisis that we had with scooters come back again. At least that's my hope and belief. Yeah. Okay, we're at the tail end of our show. Want to ask you a few fun questions, Paul. And I know it's later in the day for you in London, so you've got things to do, family to feed, and other things to get to than talk to me for more time than I've asked for. What have you been cooking these days? How have you been eating? How have you been feeding yourself? I know you're a foodie, and I also know that you're a pretty damn good chef too.
So let's see. I did become, you may not know this, I became vegetarian for a while. And
vegan or vegetarian?
Vegetarian. So still eating lots of eggs and cheese. But during COVID, that kind of went out the window. I don't know what it was like in LA, but here it was really hard to get groceries. And so we kind of just went from being like, let's just, get the food, make sure everyone's safe, everything else. Anyway, so bottom line, I'm not cooking anything interesting is the bottom line. But what is cool is you can order amazing food from Michelin-starred restaurants to be delivered right now. And you can still have that happen, which is because they want the business. So that part's been really cool.
Amazing. And how are you staying fit?
This doesn't happen on its own, right? So no, I've got, I'm a fidgeter, so I'm always fidgeting. I think that's the main thing. But also,
I'm going to send you a fidget spinner, by the way. I forgot about that.
No, I have a Peloton, like every other person in tech right now, and I use that to compete with my team and stuff.
Oh, awesome! So you're using the Peloton quite a bit. Are people still running around like Hyde Park and jogging? I don't think you're a jogger, are you? Mostly biker, like cycling? Yeah,
now I cycle everywhere. So we don't take public transit. So I cycle all the time. But I just got a Van Moof electric bike, which is
what is it called?
Van Moof, the Dutch
Van Moof.
Van Moof. Yeah.
Oh, Van Moof.
You got to check it out. They're amazing. Really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I just picked up an electric bike recently, but I do need a second one, so I'll have to check that out. I love cycling. Last year I did from Paris to Monaco over 6 days. That was crazy. And before that, I didn't cycle so much, but now I love it. And during COVID, it's a great form of transportation as well. Final question. Anything interesting you're watching? Do you even have time to watch Netflix? Like, what are you kind of most interested in consuming these days from a media perspective? Because we're stuck at home all day.
Yeah. This Is Us, that show on Amazon Prime.
Oh, I have seen it. I haven't watched it.
It's like it's an emotional. What's that?
Oh, drama. I love drama.
Yeah, but it's really good, and they sort of every kind of night my wife and I watch an episode. It's pretty amazing. So
love that. Well, I'll have to check it out this weekend. So, Paul, great to have you on the show. Love to be alive and well, and up to amazing stuff. Congrats again on the Dots acquisition, the biggest, the most M&A transaction in mobile gaming recently. And I love all the work that you're doing at Northzone. Awesome portfolio. We're gonna have to share more deal flow. So now that we're on the show, I want people to realize that put a stake in the ground. We're gonna have to be more involved with each other's deal flow, since you have some awesome deal flow, and I like to say vice versa. So anyhow, thank you for all the wisdoms and truths from the trenches from corpdev.ninja. Again, this is September 10th. See you next week.
Thanks,
Thank you, Paul.